Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Nostalgic Blast Reviews. Today we're going to be taking a look at Bakugan Defenders of the Core, originally released back on the Nintendo Wii back in 2010 and published by Activision and Sega. Bakugan is one of those series similar to Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh! That I've talked about here in the past that, while it is extremely popular, it never really achieved that critical fame that Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon did. Bakugan did have an original following from the anime, from the board game, and from pretty much everything else that it set out to accomplish. But Bakugan isn't really known as a high-profile franchise like Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Pokemon once again. So, that being said, how does this game kind of stack up compared to some of the other licensed games that I've talked about here on the channel? Is this a good one, or is this just another mediocre licensed title like ones I've talked about before? Shockingly enough, this one's actually a pretty good licensed game, all things considered.
Here's the mission, complete the mission, complete the mission, complete the mission. I am the core. I am the core. I am the core. Defend the core. I am the core. Defend the core. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Complete the mission, complete the mission. We'll be famous. When we make it, we'll go far. Run now, baby. Go and get your mission done. I am the core. I am the core. Defend the core. I am the core. Defend the core. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Complete the mission, complete the mission.
When it comes to the visuals of Defenders of the Core, this game is a step up from a lot of the other licensed games that I've talked about, not just given the fact that we're talking about more modern hardware at the time for the Nintendo Wii, compared to other reviews that I've done, like on the GBA or the Nintendo DS. But the visuals of the game look pretty good. Good color palettes, good character models, especially for the combat scenes and the cutscenes. You know, the game looks good for a good 3D Wii title. Not really much to say or complain about in this area. The battle animations are flashy, the character models look pretty good, and all things considered for what the game sets out to accomplish visually speaking, it works pretty well. And one thing I have to give this game too is that it does have a solid soundtrack. Unlike a lot of other licensed games that try and pull together original music from their IPs that they're based off of, Bakugan Defenders of the Core might be based off the series, but the music's all original. And that's what I really like about this game, is that a licensed game for once that I talk about here on this channel has a good soundtrack to actually talk about. Especially this killer intro theme that I still remember years later after playing it.
Here's the mission, complete the mission. Here's the mission, complete the mission. Complete the mission, complete the mission. We'll be famous. When we make it, we'll go far. Run now, baby. Go and get your mission done.
I want to tell you guys straight away in terms of the story, unless you've been keeping up with the anime or you grew up with Bakugan in general, the story here is really going to be inconsequential to the gameplay experience, which I think is the best part of Defenders of the Core. The story is essentially a good versus evil storyline where you take all the main characters from the original Bakugan series and pit them up against a group of evildoers who want to capture all the Bakugan and use a bunch of core fragments in order to take over both Earth and their world known as New Vestroia. Once again, all the things that I would possibly mention about the story, you would not care about whatsoever, nor would you even understand unless you were already a fan. If you are a newcomer to this game, however, the story is a decent thing. Your character gets sent to an alternate dimension by accident, and you end up helping out what is essentially a rebel group, using these mythological Bakugan beasts, and using them in battle to stop an evil criminal organization. That's really all you really need to know. Regardless of whether or not you're already familiar with the Bakugan series, the story is decent for what it is. Don't really have any high expectations going into this one when it comes to the plot. I think it's fine. Voice acting, story events, and that kind of thing, they're fine. I mean, I was a fan of Bakugan years ago, and looking back on the story now, fan or not, the story's just a kind of a decent affair. Things happen, it's not really anything to write home about, but it works for the kind of game that this is. But it does contain some pretty decent cutscenes for what it's worth.
If I had more power, I would have won easily.
What has happened?
My man here rescued you from Spectra and saved you from the power of the Vexos crystals.
I remember now. Spectra used the power of the perfect core left inside me to open a portal to Abyss. There may still be time. We've got to stop him.
Look, it's the last special Bakugan trap to make Maxis Drago. He's gonna be unstoppable!
Defenders of the Core's gameplay kind of falls into two different camps. You have the third-person action set pieces where you have your character from a third-person view sneaking into enemy bases, distracting guards using your Bakugan balls, and taking out security cameras and that kind of thing. These sections really aren't anything to write home about. You're basically just going to be doing these sections for story progression, so no real combat or battles that you might expect from the Bakugan series, so they're fine for what they are. In terms of the actual core gameplay that I found the most interesting was the actual Bakugan arena battles. Because unlike the board game or card-based gameplay that you guys might be used to from other Bakugan games or from the anime, if you remember that from back in the day, this game is essentially a beat-em-up game. What you have is where you're facing off against an enemy Bakugan, you're going through a small arena, destroying buildings, gaining power-ups, and using the Wii Remote, you can perform light attacks, heavy attacks, and special moves with your selected Bakugan. You select more as the game goes on, choosing your best fighters and leveling them up as time goes on. I really enjoyed this mechanic. I find it to be a really cool change of pace, because one criticism that I always had with the Yu-Gi-Oh games was, despite how much I enjoyed the card game, every single Yu-Gi-Oh! Licensed game does the exact same thing. Whereas with Bakugan, while some games from this series do the whole card game, board game aesthetic that you're familiar with, this game takes it into an arena-based battle system where you get to pit yourself up against other Bakugan by directly controlling them and just beating the snot out of anything that comes across your path. The gameplay is pretty basic, all things considered, but it is something unique for a Bakugan title, and it is something that is pretty enjoyable, customizing and leveling up your Bakugan, and having to strategize and taking out your enemies in these arenas. So that part I really did enjoy, and this gameplay should speak volumes to what you might expect if you decide to play this one. And I do think the gameplay is good, albeit nothing really innovative.
Protect your landmark. Defeat all opponents and Vexos crystals. Flawless.
All things considered, guys, at the end of the day, Bakugan Defenders of the Core is actually a good license game. I really didn't know what to expect from this one when I started looking into it, because I hadn't really touched a Bakugan game in years, and I really didn't remember a ton about this one before I started doing this video. All things considered, whether or not you were a fan of Bakugan back in the early 2000s, or you're someone who might be curious to try this one out for the first time, this is a good licensed game to get into. It has a decent story to it, although you will probably need to be a fan to understand some of the core details. Visually it looks decent, has a killer soundtrack, and has some pretty unique gameplay with the whole beat-em-up style arena gameplay that this game goes for. And the stealth segments, again, aren't really anything noteworthy either. They're just there for story progression. All things considered, despite some lackluster elements of the game, this is a good licensed game. This is definitely better than a lot of ones I've covered here on the channel as of late. So if you guys have the time, or if you're just curious, and if you're a long-running fan, regardless of the circumstance, if you're curious to check this one out, I can recommend this one. Don't go expecting it to be anything too special. This is a licensed game we're talking about, but this is one of the better ones to check out. And that is it for Bakugan Defenders of the Core, guys. I'm glad to be getting this review out of the backlog. I've been wanting to talk about this game for a little bit now, especially given the fact that I've never covered Bakugan here, and again, it's not really as big as Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh!, and a lot of people, even nowadays, may not even know much about the series, so... But Defenders of the Core was a nice change of pace. For once, it's actually good to have a good licensed game to talk about here on the channel. So, that's all being said, definitely go and check this one out if you're curious. Otherwise, guys, thank you once again for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, give it a like. It really does help out the channel and shows the support. If you guys want to catch more content like this in the future, subscribe to the channel if you want to catch more gaming reviews, collection videos, and everything else we do here. And if you guys are a fan of Bakugan, if you've ever played this game before, or you have your own general thoughts, leave them in the comments section. I'd love to see what you guys have to say about this one, and if anyone even remembers Bakugan in the first place nowadays. So, let me know down below. But that's all for me. And until next time, this has been Ryan from the Nostalgia Factor saying, keep on gaming.